I would now recommend a 600cc sport bike to a beginner rider, where I would never have done that before, but here's why. Well, here we are, guys. The Daytona 660 sitting pretty in front of us. We're about to go on a 7-hour ride. I haven't sat on this thing yet. The only thing I've done so far is lay around with the buttons and the dash to see like how to change the different modes. You've got road mode, sport mode, rain mode. I'm excited to sit on this thing because the seat height promises to be promising, and we're going to be going through the mountains. All right. Good. Ooh, that was not clicky. That was very smooth. Usually when I click down in gear, it's like it does like the MT-07 is like jerky. That was buttery smooth. That was good. Wow, I miss having this much bike in front of me. I miss being on a sport bike. I forgot how much bike there is in front of you when you're on a sport bike. But surprisingly, the immediate reaction to the seating position on this thing is this does not feel like you're sitting on a sport bike. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that like in a good way. Yeah, you're kind of upright on this thing. I remember my first thoughts when I got on 2006 R6, I believe it was. It was my first 600 that I got on, and you'll ride for 20 minutes and then something, either your hands, your back, your knees, your neck will be sore. The dash is in kilometers an hour, so I'm gonna leave it like that because apparently there's heavy police presence. It was emphasized that we want to be mindful of the speed limit. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, the ergonomics of sitting on like a super sport, I guess you could call it a super sport, the R6, not friendly for riding for long periods of time. I mentioned this in a video a while back where I did a things I love and hate about the R1. I'm like kind of short and this feels uncomfortable. It also feels uncomfortable like commuting on it with a backpack because of the aggressive seating position. It's not commuter friendly. One of the hate things I had in that video, the nightmare that the seating position was. I had a 20-minute commute to school. By the time I got to school, it was like, why did I do this to myself? Like I was already sweaty and tired and my back hurt. I did want to do some very early on moto vlogging because I want to kind of show you my raw first impressions on this bike for as soon as I get on it. So I didn't want to like ride for a full like 30 minutes or an hour, however long it is to our first stop, and then get on here and tell you what I feel. Because I want you to experience it with me for the first time as I find things out. But yeah, one of the first few things I noticed and even said was clicking down from neutral into first gear felt so smooth. But yeah, first impressions on the gearing, because I started on that earlier, is that the gearing changes are very smooth, like buttery smooth, which I think I remember when I first rode a Trident thinking that about it. That was the first Triumph bike I ever got on, was a Trident. It's very smooth. It's a very smooth ride. Is this what people mean when they say that Triumphs are like really smooth of a ride? Yeah, shifting up and down through the gears, it feels like a well-oiled lock. I am, for reference, 5'4". My inseam is basically the distance from crotch to the ground. So to the bottom of your foot. That is 31 inches for me. The 660 first impression does not strike me as a tippy toe type of bike. Alright, so now that I've been on this bike for like, let's say 15 minutes total, maybe 15, 20, I think one of the things that's immediately noticeable and notable about it compared to other sport bikes I have been on, in terms of seating position and height, like this bike is, I think, a little bit lower to the ground than the R7. Oh, and actually, now that we're at a stop here, I'm not tippy-toeing to the point where I like can't comfortably control the bike. I don't know if you guys can see that, how much of my foot is on the ground. Like I have a little bit of toe in the air, but it's comfortable for me. Like if I try hard and put my feet in, I can almost flat foot it. This one is actually more short rider friendly, and I think the seat, like the tank width, is a little bit slimmer. Like it feels a little bit slimmer just from what I remember about the R7. Cena is pretty nice on this. I appreciate the narrow tank, and one of the things that, oh my god, some manufacturers, and not even some manufacturers, it's just certain models of bikes from some manufacturers, they can't seem to get it right, is they'll put the foot pegs exactly in the spot where you want to put your foot down, and so as a result of that, you pretty much have to straddle the bike way more than you would normally have to straddle the bike. And so it like almost doesn't make a difference if you make a narrow tank so that riders can get more of their foot down if you end up putting the foot pegs in the way of where the feet go down. But to go on that same commentary with this motorcycle, that's not the case. They've thought this through. The tank is narrow so you can get more of your foot down, and then on top of that, they didn't put the foot pegs in the way where I want to put my foot down. One thing I'm very happy about is that the sun is shining, baby. The sun is shining. Alright, I'm not sure if this is a good area to start this, but since we have some twisting coming up, I'm gonna shut up, and I'm gonna let you guys just kind of hear the exhaust sound a little bit, of how it sounds accelerating and decelerating, so here we go. I'll take all audio effects off. Wow, well, beautiful scenery. I hope you guys enjoyed some of that exhaust sound. It sounds like a stock sport bike exhaust. It sounds better than other stock sport bike exhausts I've heard, because it sounds like a more aggressive, refined sound to me than, for example, the R7. The R7 had a lower, clunkier sound. I don't even know how best to describe the stock R7 exhaust, but to me it was just lower and clunkier. It was clickier. This sounds like a higher pitched sound, like the bike wants you to be a little bit in the higher rev ranges. It still sounds like a stock sport bike exhaust, and I haven't met like anybody that said, oh yeah, I would rather have the stock sport bike exhaust than put an aftermarket on it. Alright, I think we're going to be doing like a little bit of a like photo shoot tracking type of situation here, so I will check back in with you guys when we're on the road. We are refueled, re-lunched, re-everything. At lunch I was talking to one of the instructors, and what he said forever changed how I recommend sport bikes to beginner riders. I would now recommend a 600cc sport bike to a beginner rider, where I would never have done that before. But here's why. When I was talking to one of the rider coaches, I was mentioning how I thought that the throttle response on this bike is very smooth in road mode, which you have three modes. There's rain, there's road, and there's sport. And I thought, wow, it's actually very easy to take off at a stop, and it's not jerky. It's smooth response on the throttle. Like you just saw it in action there. It wasn't jerky, it was smooth to go, everything's dandy. And I thought, you know, this is nice when it's not intimidating, like it was on the Speed 400 and the Scrambler 400. I know in that video I harped on and on about how jerky the throttle was, and when you like flick your wrist, it like whoop, you do one of those things. It's startling, and that's something a new rider wouldn't be very used to. This bike, even though it has a lot of torque down low, when you twist the throttle, it's not a jerky response at all. It's very smooth and like an even delivery. You can put it in sport mode and get a little bit less of that. But what the rider coach told me was he would recommend this bike to a beginner only because it has rain mode, and you can put it in rain mode even when you're not in the rain, and you can cut back even more on some of that throttle response that beginners get into a mess with because they don't know what throttle blipping is. They don't expect to go over a pothole, have their hand slip on the throttle, and then just go flying. And that doesn't happen with this bike because it's so smooth on the throttle. And in the past, I never recommended 600cc bikes to beginners because there's no modes on some of these older super sports that people are buying, like the old R6s. So when you got on it, it was only a jerky response. It was super throttly all the time. And for a beginner rider, that's so unmanageable. So when you get a sport bike like this that has the option to put it in rain mode, and it's already even smooth in road mode on the throttle, it's like it's hard to say, okay, no, I wouldn't recommend it. I think if you're the type of rider where you have a relaxed mentality to riding and you're not hot-headed, you're not throttle happy, and you have kind of like this overarching personality where you have a lot of self-control over your body and your mind, I think you would do well on a 600. I think you could handle a 600 starting on it and putting it in rain mode. In Europe, obviously you don't have a de-restricted license. When you get your license, you have to start small and kind of work your way up, which is something we don't have in the United States. You can add that kit onto your bike, kind of restrict it for an A2 license, and then when you're ready you can remove the kit and unlock the full power of the bike. So to kind of emulate that in the United States, if someone was considering this bike, I'd say buy it and just keep it in rain mode for an entire season while you're learning the ropes. So we're in sport mode now. Ready? Yeah, it's fun if you're experienced and you know what you're doing. But this is dangerous as a new rider. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention about this bike is that the suspension, you can only adjust preload on it. So there's no, you can see in the forks here, there's no adjustments you can do to the forks. You can only adjust the preload on the shock. So you don't get a lot of customizability with it. But that being said, I don't feel like this is a stiff suspension for the body weight. Yeah, I'm like 120 pounds ish, and that's like 54 kilos. And usually bikes out of the factory are not tuned for a rider like me. They're usually tuned for like a much heavier rider. With gear that I have on today, I'm maybe 140 total weight that I have on the bike. But usually like these come stock out of factory for like a 180 pound rider. I don't feel like I'm sitting on top of the suspension on this bike either. I don't feel like it's stiff. We went over like several like raised crosswalks area, and at first I got up on my feet for them, and then I stopped getting up off my feet for them because I felt the suspension could handle it just fine. So I think if you're anywhere near my weight, I'm not complaining about the suspension. It feels good, it's comfortable, I'm not getting like fatigued. But yeah, the suspension, like perfectly okay. I really have no complaints or gripes about the suspension whatsoever. It feels good. Gonna move on from like the suspension part of this to just quickly mention the aesthetics of the bike. So you've been getting like a good rear end view of it because you can see the rider in front of me. But what I don't mind, the rear is great. The front, I don't know. The front looks a little bit dated to me for some reason. Here, while I have a quick opportunity to show you what I mean about the headlight. See? It's got like the buggy big headlights. Like from the top here, it's like fine because you can't see them, but like straight on. Doesn't it kind of remind you of like that old R6 styling? From certain angles, it just reminds me of that. Like the styling otherwise is like aggressive and nice. Look, that's what they look like with the lights on. Yeah, to the naysayers of the Daytona 660, like I don't know why. If it's not the aggressive super sport you were hoping for, I don't know. It's not designed to be that way, so yes. Hey. wow. The scenery, this road, everything about this is beautiful. Alright, you guys, we've made it back to the hotel in one piece, and they have this lovely bike set up in this beautiful backdrop. So I'm just gonna use it to give you some of my thoughts on this. So overall, this is a great motorcycle. I don't understand any of the confusion. If it had a different name, I think it's worth considering. If you're going to go for a middleweight bike, you want a 600cc, why not this one if you can afford it? I would even say you can start on this bike as a beginner with all the caveats I mentioned earlier. You know, if you have a good mindset, if you keep it in rain mode, this bike actually makes starting on a 600cc manageable. And again, I'd never thought I would say that about a sport bike or recommend that somebody start on a 600, but here I am, changing my opinion based on what I learned about this thing. I like that it's pretty low to the ground. It's a great overall sport bike. It's hard to really criticize it because it's been done so well. There you go, guys. That's my final thoughts on the Triumph Daytona 660. Overall, 9 out of 10. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye!